Today we're going to have a go at painting this little robin here. So stick around if you want a little bit of cosy painting time. Hello and welcome back to a cookie corner of YouTube. I've been away for a couple of weeks. I tried to get some videos up to fill in, but seriously, time ran away with me and I just couldn't. So I've been missing in action for about 10 days. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm back now and I thought we could have a nice cozy painting session. Watercolour paints to be precise, and just to keep it simple, I thought I would just do a little robin like this guy here. So the first thing you need to do is you can either go and take out one of your own pictures if you have any robin pictures, or go and source a nice picture on Pinterest or Unsplashed or anywhere else you can find a nice picture of a robin that you could use as inspiration. Now I've got some watercolor paper here. This one it's a Fabriano Artistico. It's 100% cotton. It's the extra white cold press, but use what you have. I always say use what you have. If you don't want your paper to buckle too much, it's a good idea to go over 300 gram or 140 pound paper. I've recently been using some 400 gram, which I really like because it's just that kind of right amount of, I don't know, you do a slight buckling but very little, and it holds a lot of water, which is what you want with watercolours, isn't it? To be fair. Anyway, so yes, you're going to need some watercolours. Now, I am going to be using mainly student grade. I've got a palette here. I know it says summer palette, but it's the one I've been using when I've been away. And so this has got a mix of Schmincke Academy paints. Now the Academy paints are the student grade paints. You can have similar ones if you've got a watercolor, a Winsor & Newton watercolor, Cotman watercolor set. Of which I have got two here because I'd taken them out of this set for whatever reason. I don't know. The mind boggles. Or you can have like a Daily Rowney Aquafine set. This set would contain everything you need in order to paint your robin, because we're going to do a little bit of colour mixing. So a lot of the time you can use pre-made colours, but it's a lot of fun and a lot of learning that you can have by trying to mix your own colours, and you can find something very similar in all brands. I'm not sure Daniel Smith does it. It's Academy or student grade paint, but that's what we're using today. So it's mainly student grade paint. I have got a Daniel Smith neutral tint which I may dip into, but you can also get like a Payne's grey or something in the student grade that would do perfectly fine. So let's have some fun, shall we? So the first thing I have done is to print off my picture. So I've got my reference, I've got that propped up in front of me. And I'm going to now transfer that to my watercolour paper. Now this is a gummed paper, so I'm going to keep it in the pad because that will keep it flat anyways for me, which is good. And I have also done a little sketch of him. Now, I should have sketched him onto the paper, which would have been a clever idea, but that's something that you can do. If you've never done this before, you just want to have a little go, you want to have a dabble, take your picture and your piece of watercolour paper that you're going to use. Obviously, this is just a piece of copy paper, but same difference. And go, you could use a light box if you've got one, or you can use your window. Obviously, that only works if you've got a light shining behind it, like daylight. So yeah, then you can then put your watercolour paper over the top of your picture that you printed out and draw around, get the basic shapes. And that's what we're going to be trying to do for this robin here. So just kind of positioning him there. So because I have got this on a paper, a gummed paper, I want to try and get him in the right position. So I want this head to be about there, and the bottom of his body is about there, and his feet come up to there. Okay, so let's sketch him on. I'm going to prop him up so I can have a look and see and get his head about there. I'm doing it very lightly. If you do sketch onto paper, just make sure it's a nice light touch, because this will make it easier to lose, A, if you make a mistake, or B, if you just lose the lines altogether. Then there's his little beaky. Gonna come down here. With his feathery bits and get his tail in. Let's get his tail in there. And one leg, just very gently marking that in. And he's got a foot that comes out there. You don't have to be super detailed with these if you don't want to be, because it's a watercolour. So you don't have to be absolutely spot on. So we're going to get the gestures of our lovely little birdie coming here. There's his back foot. And another claw. Another claw. And we want to get the position of his eye. So that's going to be about there. About there-ish. So what we want to try and get on are the vague places where the lines and the markings that we want on there as well. So I'm trying to just get just a suggestion of his wing there. Now, the red breast in a European robin, which is the one that I'm doing at the moment, stretches up into the head area. So it kind of goes over where his eye is, and it comes out quite a way there to his wing and comes down, and then it goes up a little bit. I'm just looking at this picture of mine. Sorry, I'm knocking the camera as well. So it kind of covers the whole of his area there. So let's get that in. Try and make sure I don't lose his beak in the process. So we've got our bird. Now I use a putty rubber to knock back the graphite. So if you roll a putty rubber over the top, it will leave you with faint lines, which you can then use to guide where you put your watercolours. So I'm going in like that. There's a bit over the eye. And that just knocks it back. Now you can't see this as well probably now, but I needed to do that in order for this to look okay. Right, so I have added in two colours that I didn't have in my set, which is a burnt sienna and a cadmium yellow, because I want to add a little bit of the yellow into his chest here. So if you look where that beautiful red chest is, he's got a little bit of yellow coming down there, which I want to capture. Okay, so brushes. Let's go on to brushes. You can use water brushes if you like. I have got some lovely, nice watercolour brushes here, so in various sizes. I think I'm going to go with a rather huge one, which is this 14. It's a CY14. So I'm going to use that, and I have got some water. This is a rather handy little water box. It's called Wasserbox. It's German, I do believe. But the thing about it is it has two wells, so that I've got clean water and water for rinsing off my brushes with paint. Okay, let's grab in my other paints. And I'm going to, first of all, get myself a rag to dab off my water with. I'm going to want to do the red breast first, just because I fancy it. So I'm going to do this as the wet on wet. This is a technique where you wet the paper first in the area that you want the paint to go, and you drop in your paints. So let's try this. You don't want to overload your paper with water because it will take forever to dry, but you also don't want it to be too dry. So you look to see if you've got a slight sheen on there. I think you can see that under the light. First of all, I've got some cadmium red. So whatever brand you've got, cadmium red, I'm going to mix that into my palette here. It's beautiful cadmium red. I really like that. And at the minute, I'm just going to use pure old cadmium red just to drop in. So I'm going to drop that into the wet. So this is a wet paint on wet background. And I don't mind if I go over his beak, that's fine. I'm going to get this chest in here. Now, what I'm going to add to that is a little bit of alizarin crimson, just a tad, because I want it to have a little bit of a punch to it. So I'm just adding a little bit of that in, and then bringing that down. And then I've got some cadmium yellow here, which I'm just going to add in there. And I'm going to drop that into the bottom part. Let me take you down. You can probably see a little better then. I'm dropping that cadmium yellow into there so that drifts together nicely. And this is the first layer, so you can always go back in and add in more water, because the thing with watercolour is when it dries, it will lighten. But we want to get our first layer down so we know where everything is going to go. Now I'm going to have a go at making some kind of a brown. So I've got some burnt sienna here, which is a beautiful reddy brown colour. Just mixing that into my palette here, like so. Rinse it off, and I've got some ultramarine blue. So that's the next one I'm going to use just to add into that. And I want to get kind of like a grey going on. That's what I'm aiming for. You could use a neutral tint for this if you've got it as well. That's also rather handy to have. And what I'm going to do is bring it down here where those lighter feathers are. I'm not going to mind that the red is drifting into it. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to be quite happy with that if it does. It's kind of needing a little more blue in this, I think. Just play around with your colours. If you've got a spare piece of paper to hand as well, you could have that at the side so that you can then test it before you put it on your paper. It's always a good idea to have a little tester page going on. So I'm just kind of doing this as a wet on dry now to get some kind of feathers going on here. Feathers McGee. And I'm going to leave a little bit of the white of the paper there, and I'm going to add some water to that mix to make it even lighter, and just bring it in here, bringing it in around the front a little bit there. So we've got some white, because if we look at our picture, he's got kind of a white bit in there too. Take you back out slightly. So let me prop my picture up. Knocking my paints everywhere. Not a handy thing to do. As long as I don't knock my water brush over, bottle over, should I say. So I'm going to leave that like it is. Rinse off. And now we want a lovely darkish brown colour for his head. First of all, I'm going to leave this just to dry off a little bit because I want this to be quite separate. So I'm going to leave this to dry and then we'll go back in with the brown. Okay, so for the brown, I've mixed together some raw sienna and some ultramarine blue with a tiny touch of cadmium yellow. So I'm going to see how that goes, and I think that's probably just about right. So now I'm going to paint in his head and take that all the way down. Now we're going to darken this up as we go, but we want to get the base down first. Don't worry, I know some people worry about mixing the colour again that they already got. Just go with it, because you'll have a lovely kind of a browny base to go with. And to be honest, you don't want to be mixing exactly the same colour, because not all things in nature are exactly the same, are they? You've got variation in feather colours. If we look at our bird, for example, he's got a variation of different browns in there. So you can just get a base down and work into it after that. So I need to mix some more. So I've got my alizarin, sorry, my raw sienna there, and my ultramarine blue. I'll whack it all together. Where's my tester paper? So that's looking a bit too grey. Add in a bit more red. It's like chemistry, really. And a little touch more of the blue. And let's try that one. Maybe a little touch of the cad yellow in there. It's giving it more of a greeny tinge. As I say, it is a case of trial and error. And just playing. Just take some time to play. Oh, that's better. So we've got a nice browny colour coming up there. And I'm just dropping this in on top, trying to get that wing in there a little bit, but we can define that later. And just make him fluffy. If you want to make him fluffy, you just take the tip of your brush and just fluff him out. We want him to be a nice fluffy little fella. I love fluffy robins. They're so cute. Okay, I'll get his tail in there as well. Can't miss out his tail. He needs a tail. So going in with that. And that gives it kind of like a warm undercolour that we can work on top of. Okay. So now I'm looking at this bit here, which is kind of yellowish grey. So that colour that I've just mixed, I'm going to add more of the cad yellow into it, and then put a load of clean water in there, and that's looking about right, actually. So that can go down here, and I'm going to kind of blend it in a little bit with the grey at the side. Using those lines there. Cool. So again, we're going to want to let him dry off, and then we can add in another layer. Make sure he's nice and dry. You could use a hairdryer as well to dry him off, which I will probably do off cam because it's noisy. So I'll dry him off now, and then we can go into our second layer. Okay, so I've mixed up another colour, and I mixed my raw sienna with some neutral tint. Remember I mentioned that neutral tint. You could also use Payne's grey. It might be a little bluer. Some Payne's greys are bluer than others. So test out yours, but the neutral tint, a lot of the student palettes don't have it because you can mix these things, but I find it so handy just to have a neutral tint in my palette, which is why I put one in one that I'm using. So what I'm going to do now is to start to add in some depth to his head and darken out those feathers of that side a bit. Always remembering to keep the fluffy. Always keep the fluffy. Yeah. Robins do have different colours. I know American robins are different to the European ones. So you do whichever bird you like. You know, you go for your favourite bird. I know robins are very popular at Christmas, but I also like to see them throughout the winter time. I'm going to go in with a bit of that darker just to add some dark areas in. So I'm dropping some of that neutral tint in. I'm not going for pure realism here, you can probably tell. I am just adding in a little bit of the darker for the areas to define those feathers a little bit. I'm not going for major detail, he's just going to be a little fluffy boy. So I'm not going to worry too much about getting loads and loads of detail. And that back tail will also need to be darkened because not only is it darker in itself, but it's in the shadow as well. So a little bit of that neutral tint, a little bit of the cadmium. Sorry, burnt sienna, not cadmium, burnt sienna. If you find you've got too much water on your paper, what you can do is take a clean part of a kitchen roll or something, kitchen paper, and just dab it off. And then that will get rid of some of the wetness for you. And I think I'm a bit overzealous with the wet paint there. Yeah, it's looking okay. Now I want to deepen up his chest. So getting some of my cad red again. Getting rid of some of that water off my brush, getting some of that alizarin crimson into that mix. And I'm going to give him a little more on top. Just getting a bit too much water in there. Take some out. Getting rid of some off my brush. And blending out into the area above his head there, which is quite red. A bit more. Bringing that up there. I'm not worried if I go into his eye area or the beak area. I'm really not worrying about it because I'm going to be going in with some of that lovely cad yellow, mixing in even a bit more perhaps as well. Sit still. I need to reorganize my palettes. There we go. Make you fluffy. Fluffy. And we need to add back in some of that grey tone that we mixed from a bit of cad red in there. darker. I want just add in a little bit there over that white, splashing on my paper, so dab it off. Okay, Payne's grey. Just add in some fluffy into his wing. Fluffy, fluffy. And over the top, dropping some into that wet brown paint. So that will all merge together. Well, I hope it will merge together quite nicely. Up there. Like so. And then coming down to that tail, I want that to be quite dark. So I'm just going to add a lot of that grey into there. Like so. I'm going in with some pure cad yellow here, just to lighten up that area there. And again, we're going to let it dry. So leave that to dry, be back to add in some more detail. Okay, so we've got a dry bird. Hurrah! Now I want to add in the little details. So I've got that neutral tint again. I'm just going to put some in my palette because I don't want it to be too wet. To be quite dry, because I'm just going to use the tip of my brush. I'm just going to rinse that off a minute. Get all the too much wet out of it. And I am going to add in his eye with this dark grey. I'm going to do it really carefully. Could do it with a smaller brush, but I've got quite a nice point on this big thick brush which I can use. So just dropping it in. Don't worry about making a mistake, because anything in the main can be corrected. So I'm just going to get his beak in here. Now I know this beak's going to need to be a little darker, so I'm just going to go straight into the Payne's grey here. Get this beaky coming up here. Little pointy beak. Comes over at the end. Ah. And it comes into here a little bit. There we go, one beak. And what I want to do is also add in these little spindly legs. So that one's going in there. That one's going in there. I'm going to get his feet in here. Trying to follow the pattern of the foot. As I say, I am by no means a watercolour expert, but I do enjoy a dabble with it, especially for things like birds, because they lend themselves to, well, watercolour is such a good medium for painting birds, I feel. And I'm not a purist when it comes to watercolour either. I don't say, oh, you've got to leave the white of the paper. No, use a bit of gouache, use a bit of acrylic white if you need to. I don't mind as long as you get the result. There's no such thing as a wrong way to do something. Only ways that work. So if it works, do it. I'm not a purist at all by any stretch of the imagination. I need to thicken that leg at that top there. There we go. Helps if you can see him, doesn't it? So, sticking off there. I want to add a little bit of shadow into there. So I'm going to add some more water into there. Just a light shading underneath. And you've got your simple watercolour robin now. What I'm going to do at the bottom is I'm just going to get some of that grey and just really water it down, like super water it down. And then I'm just going to add a little shadow to plant him on the page somewhere, otherwise he looks like he's floating in midair. So just looks like he stood on a little bit of snow. You can add a bit of blue in there if you want as well. Just dropping in some water makes him look like he stood on a bit of snow. For my final touch, as I said, I am no purist, so I'm going to give him a little bit of a glint in his eye with a gel pen, and I'm just going to pop that in there and just define his beak a little bit there. And there he is, little robin. He's not exactly the same as this robin, but he's not far off. So go and have a play with your paints, have a play with colours. If you don't like the colours I did, play around with it. That's the whole point of learning how to use a material. Play around with your watercolours, test them out, do some colour mixing and see what colours that you like the best for your particular bird. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll be back very, very soon. Well, hopefully with something else. So stick around, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be back soon. Bye for now.